So what you'll see in today's video is starting with this pattern, which I'll show you from beginning to this, how to start with the module, then be able to subdivide it and then color it using all of these parametric tools. Now, later on, you'll also see a work session where I create a different pattern. So these are different exercises that share with you just different techniques and different approaches to creating and subdividing patterns. This is a passion of mine. It's a very interesting process, so I'm sharing it with you. If you want to download this script, check out my website capettidavid.com. You would be supporting my work, and you can also access the files to see how they came together exactly. So thank you very much for being here. Hopefully you're excited to learn a little bit more about parametric design, and let's jump right into it. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is create an octagon. And so we can either bring in a polygon, or we're going to start by creating a point. So we'll go to point or construct point. Then I'll route it through a point component so we can change that location if we want to. Then I'm going to move this point up in the Y direction. So move component unit Y, and then we'll bring in a slider to move this, let's say 10.00. All right, so now we're going to take this and rotate it by 8. So now we'll take this point, rotate, using that origin or the origin point as the plane input, the point that we moved as the geometry input, and then here we'll change the angle to degrees, because what we need to do now is bring in a number of 360. So I'll do quotation marks 360. That gives me a panel with 360, and then I'll do quotation marks 8 because that's how much we're going to subdivide it by. So 360 divided by 8 equals 45. Now we can take that and bring in a series component, step by 45. We know we want 8 of them. And now we can use this series component to plug in more than one number, 0, 45, 90. And so all of those numbers, obviously we can change this if we want to 10. But the idea is that this pattern is based off of an octagon, so we can keep this consistent. Now if we bring in a polygon or a polyline and we connect it, notice that it keeps it open, so we need to set boolean to true so it closes the polyline. But what I want to do is rotate this so we have one of these straight segments aligned with the X direction. So what we need to do now is rotate. We'll rotate those points first relative to the midpoint, and the angle is going to be 360 divided by 8, so this number divided by 2. And that'll be the input as degrees. And so technically we've rotated the points, which means that we've rotated the polyline if we use those as the input. And I do like to hide the wire display, so it's a little bit easier to see here. All right, so now with this one, I'm going to also turn it into a surface. So I'll go to boundary surfaces. Next, what I want to do is pick this segment and offset it by the same amount as the length. So to do that, we need to first explode this polyline. Then we need to select it. So I'll go to list item. Now I pick this one. So if this is 0, then this is 1, 2, 3, or 0, minus 1, minus 2. So I'll go to set index, right click on index, I'll go minus 2. So now that we have this segment, now I can also determine the length of it, 7.6, and I can offset this curve using that distance. And if I loft together those two, I can flatten the input. And so now we have the modules for creating the pattern. Now there's still a few things that we need to do. But for now, let's clean this up. And now I'll show you. We'll plug this into a geometry component. Same with this one. It's just an empty component just so I can see it clearly. But these are kind of the base surfaces. And I'll disable the preview on everything else. Now what we need to do is figure out the distance between this line segment, this point, and this line segment, which we already have. So we'll go back to this, get the midpoint, or the curved middle, and create a line segment between midpoint or the origin point and that point. Why? Because that's the distance or the length that we need to move the whole pattern in the X direction. So we'll go here to X, unit X. Notice that it only moves it by half, so we actually have to take that length and multiply it by 2. Now notice that if I want to keep creating more copies, then I need to plug in more than one number. So 18.4 is the number here. I need to do that a series of times. So I'll bring in a series component, use the number as the step and the count as how many. So we'll go here to 5. And since we're starting at 0, it's actually going to create 1 at the beginning, so we can disable the preview here. Now we're going to do the same thing, but in the Y direction. And this is going to create an array of these in the Y direction. Now for this, we need to graft the input. And notice that now we've created that array. Now we're missing some here, because we have still this one, but this one is going to be arrayed by 1 less than the array here above. So let me show you how to do that. So what I'll do here is take this and copy it. We'll subtract 1. And for the input, we'll use this diamond. So the idea here is that I'm copying two here. Here's why. Because these are the ones that come out as the clean pattern, or the original portion of the pattern. Now, before we array it, we can introduce, or we can change this pattern to be something else, plug it in here, and we would have a different array. So this is what I did in the tutorial later on, is starting with a simple pattern array, we can separate that and keep that as a base geometry. So then you can develop it in different ways, because once you pick a direction you're going, then it's really hard to go backwards unless you have the base one and you can just create different iterations. So I'll do that here. I'm going to disable the preview on everything here. Bring this down, tap Alt. Now I can take this one, middle click, and then disable. Because now we can take, like I said, this geometry, and we're going to change it around a little bit. Now, before, what I did was use Voronoi, which has some benefits. What I'll do here is take a different approach. I'll start by creating discontinuity, which is, or using this component, which is going to give us a point at every corner it turns. Now this is a surface, but it will treat it as the outer perimeter polyline. And so now, here using these points, I will create some circles. So 5.5. And I will split this surface using these curves. Something like this. And I'll do the same thing. So I'll double click here to create a relay and override that one. So this kind of is done every time you plug in a surface. So we can do the same thing here again, but for the surface, the other one, which then we can change the size. And now here, we can take these and use those as the array. So now we can plug those into these. And then since we have this big gap, we can just hide the wire and replace these two. Now I'll go here to preview, and I think it's because we need to graft the input on this one, graft the input on this one. See? That's what it is. You have to graft the geometry input for both of these. Okay. So what I did on this one, which is a little bit different than the other one, is rather than use Voronoi or use a different way of subdividing the spaces evenly, I just split the surface using the circles. And let's hide this. because this creates a completely different pattern just by using the circle subdivision here. So I'll leave it here. Now, the next part is going to be to give this some color. So what I'll do is I'll take these two. We'll use a surface component and plug all of those into it so we can flatten the output or the input. Because what we need to do now is evaluate or understand how big all of those surfaces are. So to do that, we need an area component to understand the area of each panel. Once we have the area component, then we can deconstruct it to know the range of numbers that we have. And the reason why we need the range of numbers is because we need to know what the smallest and biggest numbers are and everything in between. So what we'll do is we'll go here to a gradient component. Now by default you might have a different one, so you can change the presets. We'll go to start, end. Then we need to know the biggest and smallest number here, so we'll go to bounds. So 17. We'll deconstruct domain, so the start and end are going to be separate. Now we can take this end one and divide it by 2. And this will give us the point around the center here to distribute the smallest and biggest one. So with this, we can now bring in a custom preview and plug in all of those surfaces and color them using this material. Now, if we're not seeing too much color variation, we can change that by changing the parameter input here. So if we see that's 8, we'll just do 8.000. And now we can kind of change where the gradient happens within the pattern here. So now we can see in live time, as we change some of this pattern, the colors will change according to its area. And with these other numbers, we can change, let's say, where the other intersect. And sometimes we can have portions of the pattern kind of get close and create intricate designs like this. And we can go back to this and see, maybe, if we find a different color scheme that looks a little bit better, or even doing this, changing the preset to something like this rainbow one, which has a lot of drastic color changes, but hey, maybe this is something that can help you visualize the pattern a little bit better. And depending on the contrast between the light and the dark, you get, different designs here. All right, so with that being said, I will be sharing with you this tutorial script. I'll also be sharing with you the other script, which is going to be the beginning, the pattern portion, and then the final part here, which actually offsets the pattern and creates this, what's this called? The stained glass window style. So you'll see a little bit more development here. If you want to bring back the other ones, select it, middle click, disable, and enable the next one. Like this. All right, so thank you very much for watching. If you want to support my work, check out my website, capettidavid.com. You can download this for free. You can also subscribe as a member, and you can also access a lot more parametric things that can help you get closer to your goals. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope to see you on the next one. So here in this video, I wanted to show the process and also wanted to show you the entire work session where I created this pattern. Now let me show you what I did is I'll disable the preview on all of this and bring back, or actually let's just disable this and enable this one. And so what we did was at the beginning here was starting with this pattern. We just create a basic array. This is the beginning of the entire pattern that you're going to see in a second. So just understand that even though a pattern may look really complicated, it could start with something as simple as this. This is an octagon that has a diamond in the middle. And what it does here is we're able to array it and expand it this way. We can change the size, but what we won't be able to change is the pattern type. It's going to be, like I said, an octagon. So we're working off of that strategy. From there, I'll go to disable the script here, and I'll be sharing this with you guys as well, but let me bring this back and show you that this is how complex a pattern can get. And all we did was take these original surfaces and then change them using a technique where we're creating a set of points, subdividing them evenly, and then creating the array once again. What you'll see here is that we can change the size of this, and the pattern would change as well. We also have these circles. So depending on what you want to pick at the end, you'll have a lot of variability within the script here. And that's for the octagon. Then we also have the same thing for the inner diamond. And you can bake this at the end, so you have many different patterns you can create just for one design. And I wanted to share the work session here, but I will also be sharing with you the entire process for creating this. So hopefully you found this interesting. And if you want to download it, like I said, check out my website.